Hello there. Welcome back to our little fiction writers coffee clutch. Love at first write. Um, Usually taking place in my little red home office, but now taking place in my backyard here in Virginia. Since everyone is in the house, still under quarantine for COVID, and many of a couple of my teenagers are still asleep, and I don't want to wake them, but so today I want to talk about something a bit different, a bit interesting. I want to talk about how I believe um, that every serious writer, regardless of what your stance is on religion, needs to know the stories of the Bible, because it is such a seminal work of literature, and it is something that is so much a part of our cultural DNA that I really don't see how you could not be versed in it. I think if you are not versed well in the stories of the Bible, you are at a tremendous disadvantage to other writers who are. I've realized this with my own children who are not nearly as versed in the Bible as I am, even though we do send them to Sunday school and such. But how that uh, affects their ability to make connections. Even Christopher Hitchens, who I love, right, and who is a famous atheist, had said that he cannot imagine his life as a writer and a reader without the Bible. That it is, an absolutely critical piece of literature for us all, and that to be familiar with it enriches our lives, enriches our reading lives, and I think uh, enhances whatever innate talent that we have as writers, innate storytelling talent, and really helps us uh, write stories that readers connect to. I mean, it's funny, a few years ago, I remember I was actually, the reason why I'm talking about this today on Love at First Write is because as I was taking my morning walk, I was remembering something that I put up on Facebook for my friends a few years ago, and I said, what are the 10 books that really influenced your life? And I put my list up, and my list was the usual. I mean, all the things, Dashiell Hammett, Milan Kundera, Love in the Time of Cholera was a big one. John Steinbeck's East of Eden, Dracula, all the things that I love. And a friend of mine, um, posted her 10, and the number one book she put on it was the Bible. Now, she is a prolific reader. She also happens to be my kid's pediatrician, but and the rest of the books were also a lot more of what you'd expect, and they were incredible. She gave a really great list. But as I looked at the number one book that she put on that list, I realized, how I hadn't seen the forest for the trees. I hadn't seen what was right in front of me, and how, yes, for anyone who is really serious about reading and writing, whether they realize it or not, the Bible is a seminal work. Um, the, I was thinking about all the classics, modern classics, as well as ones, obviously, the classics from several hundred years ago were heavily based in the Bible because of how prolific religion and the Catholic Church was. But when you look at just wonderful fictional classics that we love to sink our teeth into. You think about Dracula, the story of the fallen angel. And, I mentioned Steinbeck again, which is the story of Cain and Abel. And, when I came back from my walk, by the way, I sat down and I saw that Stephanie Meyer was releasing a new Twilight companion book called Midnight Sun, right? That's coming out in a few weeks. And that's what got me thinking about the Bible again, because I realized how heavily the Twilight series is steeped in the Bible. And it's interesting because that sort of iconic cover where you see the very pale hands holding an apple. And so you think that, That's very evocative of Adam and Eve, obviously, right? You bite of the forbidden fruit. But when you actually read in the series, which I have recently reread because now my youngest is into the series, right? Because she's 12 years old and she's like right at the cusp of becoming, a young woman. She's in early adolescence and she's really into the series. So I've read it again with her and I've rewatched the movies with her. Um, and I'm realizing, just how steeped it is in biblical stories and in biblical promises, the promise of love, the promise of an eternal soul. Um, Gosh, I mean, even a movie franchise like John Wick, I mean, there's so much of the story of Job in there, the man who loses everything. And really, I mean, in the story of Job, has to have faith in God that it will be returned to him. Of course, in the story of John Wick, um, there are all these strange sort of quasi supernatural elements, but at the same time, he is extracting revenge, um, and yet we are always confident somehow that everything will be returned to him. Um, I think that is, a theme that is in any sort of moral story, really. The confidence that in the end, that that if you follow, the moral law, if you are endeavoring to do what is right, that order will be restored in the universe. And that is really such an underlying feature of so many of the genres we read in. Maybe with the exception of noir, right? But and a few other outlying genres, but it is absolutely an imperative part of how we as readers interpret stories. We do interpret them morally, whether we intend to or not, whether we are religious or not. That is simply a part of being human. It is so written into our civil society that to understand that mechanism, to truly understand how it works, to understand the complexities of it, it is enormously helpful to read the Bible for both its moral constructs and its seeming contradictions, because there are many of them. You have some incredibly powerful and painful stories in the Bible about faith, about endurance, about doing the right thing, even when your whole world will collapse around you, and yet there is always that promise of the eternal soul that is being held to you at the end, that is being held before you at the end. I mean, Abraham takes his son Isaac, up and is ready to sacrifice him because God is testing him. And at the last minute, as Abraham is about to kill Isaac, God says, no, don't do it. And as I think about that, I remember Christopher Hitchens writing about that, saying, if God told me to take my son and sacrifice him a rock, I would have said, F you. And, I mean, that's really something to contemplate, isn't it? But at the same time, when I really look at that story and I take it apart as a writer and as a reader, that sort of incredible faith that you must have in whatever the moral object is in your story, it really, in order to have a compelling story, that faith for your main characters must be as unshakable as Abraham's faith was in God, that he actually trusted God so much that he was willing to sacrifice his son. And I think as writers, we have to have faith in our characters and our story in a very similar sort of, well, maybe not so similar, but in a similar enough way, for heaven's sake. I mean, if we as writers do not believe in what we are writing, I think that it comes through and the story falls flat. And to get back to Twilight again and taking it and connecting it to the story of Abraham and Isaac. When you think about Bella, and the faith she has in Edward that he is not going to kill her, even though he thirsts for her blood. That if he makes her into a vampire, that she has not lost her eternal soul. I mean, that is huge. She is placing so much faith in his goodness and in the goodness of the moral law, really, that if you are a good person, even if you are a good vampire, you're not going to lose your soul. That's ridiculous. Of course not, she says to him. I believe you have a soul. You have a soul, and you're not going to take my soul away by taking me on this journey with you and allowing me to love you forever and live with you. And Edward, on the other hand, loves her so much that he doesn't want to take her. He's afraid that he's going to take her soul, that he wants to believe what she's saying. He wants to believe that if he makes Bella a vampire, that she is not going to become wretched, that she is not going to become a blood drinker of humans, the way he did for a time, um, before he became, the vegetarian vampires, they said, and he, only drank the blood of animals. But he loves her so much that he fears for her, and that is what is at the root of the tension of their romance, and that's what makes it so big, because they are willing to sacrifice so much for each other, and they believe so completely in the goodness of each other that that they are willing to give up. Each of them are willing to give up something great in order for the other to thrive, in order for the other to continue to live in the light. So I think that's about it. And I, as always, welcome comments. Please hit the subscribe button. I would love for you to join this Fiction Coffee Clatch, and visit me at victoriadohertybooks.com. Thank you.